Ladies and gentlemen, Dean Fox is about to come on and absolutely empower you to create your breakthrough, to release the mental handbrake, to really tap into your power, your flow, and your performance effectiveness. So stick around because this is going to be a powerful interview. Before that, I just want to say thank you for being here, for choosing to be and become your greatest possible self. We're going to have a lot of fun. So thank you for choosing to invest your time and your energy to grow yourself and just be the best version of yourself that you can be. Thank you. Next, I'm going to share our iTunes review of the week. This week, it is by, I believe it's by Jenny Bell. Jenny Bell says, so much value. Chris obviously pours his heart and soul into the podcast marathon. He brings out the best in his guests, sharing their gifts with the world. Thank you so much, Jenny. I appreciate you in that review. If you want a chance to get shouted out on a future 12-hour live stream, go to beyourgps.com/iTunes or search Greatest Possible Self on the Apple Podcast Store. Let us know what you love, what you want to see more of, and how we can improve the show for you. Thank you so much in advance. I'm going to introduce Dean in just a second. Before that, grab a piece of paper, grab a pen, be ready to take notes. I know there's going to be some fire in this interview, and definitely stick around all the way through to the end because one idea has the power to change everything for you. Let's introduce Dean. Dean Fox is a leading mindset coach, trainer, consultant, entrepreneur, and speaker, and he's based in the northeast of England, United Kingdom. Dean has trained and coached thousands of entrepreneurs across the country with his powerful message. He's pioneered better education for those desiring more in life. Turning the personal development world on its head, Dean wanted to stand out by helping them overcome their doubts, eliminate their fears, and take actions necessary to build a life and business that they want without resistance, guaranteed. Dean passionately believes that whatever you want is available to you, and through his experience in coaching, he can help you get it. Dean has a number of programs and works with individuals, groups, employers, and professionals, and has helped company executives, entrepreneurs, authors, professional athletes, salespeople, coaches, speakers, consultants, and experts from all across the world to achieve more than they thought possible in less time and with zero resistance. And Dean, are you ready to rock the house, my man?
I am indeed. Thanks for having me, Chris.
Absolutely, man. You're live on Becoming Your Greatest Possible Self. Thank you for being here. I know we had such a great pre-interview call. I'm so stoked to dive in today. The theme today, Dean, is create your breakthrough. What does that mean for you, Dean?
Like I said, exactly as the title says, really, when we had our call before, we talked about this idea of, a lot of people find themselves either stuck or in a place they don't really want to be and not sure how to get out.
Yep.
And that's exactly where I found myself a number of years ago. But getting to that point where you're able to, as I call it, release that mental handbrake, when you can actually feel yourself taking actions that are going to get you to where you want to be without that resistance. That's when you feel like you're having a breakthrough.
I love it, dude. I love that the theme today is so in alignment with you and your message, Dean. It's gonna be a profound conversation for anyone who's here. So I mentioned in your intro the great work that you're doing, man. So we got to know you, your coaching. Let's go back into your journey a little bit and talk about what was your journey through releasing your mental handbrake like and becoming a coach, man. Tell us about that, Dean.
Okay, so I started my life as an engineer.
Yeah.
I worked in the engineering industry and the steel industry in the UK. And I was always after more. I always kept progressing. I was always looking for the next thing. And I'd worked my way up to, senior engineering and engineering management. And then I took a sidestep into the commercial world, into sales and business development, staying in the same industries to start with. But I suddenly realized, I think, over a period of time that I always felt there was more to life than kind of the 9-to-5 grind.
Yep.
I just wasn't sure what it was. And I had my first real kind of light bulb moment, if you like, in the early 2000s when I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki.
Yeah.
And that kind of just stoked the fire a bit about entrepreneurship and this idea that, you're not going to get what you want out of life if you're working for somebody else all the time. And there's different quadrants of people.
Yeah.
And so that pushed me to look elsewhere. And I started to think about maybe branching out and doing something for myself. But in the early 2000s, that's what we did. I left corporate world and I set up a business with my wife in the real estate investment development. And during that period, the next 4, 5, 6 years, things went really well. It was a great time to be in the real estate industry.
Yep.
In that period of time, and I also I read another book a couple of times during that period that kind of inspired me again to take some more steps. But I think what really brought me into the personal development world and the coaching world was that first of all, a few things happened. So in 2008, we had probably the worst financial crisis that most of us ever experienced. I'd certainly ever experienced, and that was literally from the real estate industry. Was almost like someone switched off a tap.
Yep.
Our business, virtually wasn't there the next morning when we opened the doors at 9 a.m. So that was a real blow. That was a bit of a shock. It was one of those things that I don't think it was so much that we weren't expecting it. More about we weren't expecting the impact that it would have.
Yeah.
A bit like where we are currently. Yeah. With what's going on, we had to adapt almost overnight.
Yeah.
Everything we thought would work before didn't work any longer, and a whole series of new systems. And that was a first kind of real obstacle, roadblock.
Yeah, I want to dive into that, Dean, because I think it's especially for people who are having challenges adapting to stuff that's going on right now. I keep saying there's always uncertainty in life, right? There's always going to be things that don't go as planned. And right now it's just happening to, exponentially more people at the same time. So it's like it's more visceral, it's more impactful. I think we're feeling it more. What lessons did you learn back then that you're applying now? And could be around mindset, could be around, tactics, strategies, and business. What did you learn, Dean?
The biggest thing for me was to recognize that every situation is either an obstacle or an opportunity. And the person who decides that is you.
Yeah. Yep.
I look back at 2008. We lost our business in 2008, and yet there were businesses that were created in that time that are now billion-dollar brands.
Yep.
And the only difference between those that succeeded from that point on and people like myself who struggled in that period was the way that they approached that period of time. And so the biggest lesson I'm learning now is that in the current climate, I'm looking at this as one of the biggest opportunities there could be. You just need to find a way through it. How can we take advantage of what's there? And I often talk about three words. Is that often we ask ourselves, "Can I?" Those are the two words that we ask ourselves. Can I do this? Can I find a way? And that starts from the assumption that it's not possible. We start from a negative point of view.
Yeah.
We only have to add a third word to that, and we change our whole perspective, which is how can I?
Yeah.
And as soon as we start from that perspective, the assumption is, I know I can, I'm just not sure how yet. And that's been the biggest difference between when we went through this in 2008 and what we're going through now, is that we're just looking at, okay, we know that's possible, just how can we do it?
Yeah, this is great, man. I hear the big distinction was, instead of coming from a place of the cards are stacked against me, can I even do this? Like, am I enough? It almost goes into our worthiness, our own identity, and it moves into, how can I? No, the answer's out there. The solution's out there. I just get to be resourceful enough, flexible enough, adaptable enough, resilient enough to go and find it, to keep working until I find it. Because there's people out there who are finding the solutions, and they're prospering, and they're taking advantage of the situation in a good way, and serving people and growing themselves, growing their companies. What do they know? How do they see the world in a way that has them prosper and thrive during these times when most people are struggling and allowing it to defeat them and take them out of the game?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And I see that all the time. And when I'm coaching people, that's what we're talking about. We're looking to help them see, okay, it's not about, I'm really struggling at this point in time. And I often say that, if we start from that perspective, then that's what we're going to see in the world.
Yeah.
If we start from a point of view of lack, then we're going to experience more lack.
Yeah.
We've got to see the positive. We've got to start looking for opportunities in order to find them.
Yeah. Yeah, this is so good, so good. I think having an online business today as well, something that is location independent and like virtual, is like such a, for all the coaches, for example, for you, like it's such an advantageous position to be in, because you have like this skill set that you can execute on. You can be a tactician and go serve and impact people's lives and help them release that mental handbrake from all around the world. And I think it's such a beautiful time for online businesses to be thriving and moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely, and I totally agree. I also think that what happens is that even most of my previous coaching and involvement will have been, and my speaking will have been face to face.
Yeah.
Events up and down the country or internationally. There's no real difference other than we're just switching from that to a virtual world. So I've done more speaking probably over the last 6 or 8 weeks than I probably did in the previous 6 months.
Yeah.
But I've just, it's because I'm being able to reach out through mediums like yourself and other people. Whereas some of the people I speak to in our industry are saying, I'm really struggling to get in front of clients, or I have to cancel events. And it's like, well, you don't have to cancel them. You just can't do them face to face.
Yep. And I think it's, as that service provider, we also get to empower our clients, our partners, our vendors, and things like that to come up with solutions for them so that they can continue moving forward in their business as well. Like, for example, if there's a live event that was supposed to happen and someone's like, oh, well, we're done. The organizer's like, we're done with this event. We can't do it because it can't be live. It's like, okay, well, can you do it online? Can you create a virtual space where people who bought the tickets, may want some other offers or other value that we can add, but to give them something instead of nothing. And I think that's something that a lot of people might be resistant to, because when the crisis hits, they just retract and they say, oh shoot, I'm scared. And instead of being adaptable and resourceful and releasing the mental handbrake, they like stop.
Yeah, absolutely. I resonate a lot with that, because that period from 2008 when we lost the business through to the next couple of years, I was in that mode. I was just I was retracting all the time. Everything was a backward step. And that was both from a financial perspective in terms of business, but also from a personal perspective. And I talk about this a lot, that we end up, if we're not careful, in this downward spiral because our focus shifts, and all we see is the problems and the obstacles that are in front of us, and it gets darker and darker because we can't see a way forward. But it's because we're not really looking for one. We're just looking at where the next obstacle is coming from. And that's what happened. 2008 to 2010, it pushed us in all of those directions, both from a business and a personal perspective. And then in 2010, we'd come to probably a decision from a financial perspective where we had nowhere else to go, really. I was cornered, and I made a decision that in order to try and preserve preserve our home, was my ultimate commitment to the family, was we wouldn't lose our home.
Yes.
And I took some advice, and the only way around that at the time was for me to become bankrupt and kind of lose everything else that we had. And so I made that decision that that's what I was going to do. And I said, right out of that, the only way I see forward for now in the short term to batten down the hatches and kind of steady the ship was for me to go back into the corporate world of employment and get a stable job, if you like, for a period of time. Unfortunately, what happened was in March of that year, in March 2010, my wife and I and my youngest son were involved in a road traffic accident. And that was it was fairly serious. It took 2 hours to cut us from the vehicle, and we probably spent about 8 to 10 months recovering from that, both physically and probably psychologically as well. And what that did was it stopped me being able to take that step of saying, well, I'm just going to go back into employment. And I physically couldn't do it.
Right.
And that added more pressure to the situation.
Yeah. It's like there's the harmony, or the harmony of things that were bad, were going wrong, so to speak. The pain, right? Like, it's just, okay, so there's the financial crisis, and now there's like a physical injury that you have to deal with as well. It's like those two combined on top of each other, like, could be soul crushing, So like what you were talking about with like trying to move forward, but like taking steps back and having to like it's almost like we retract because it's all that we can really grasp, all that we can really hold on to. It's like, no, I'm gonna stay safe. I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to recover. And so it's almost like going within in fear might even be a required step to be able to go forward if we have not trained ourselves in that mindset,
Yeah, for sure. And we talk about things happening for a reason often now. But I look back, at the time I couldn't see that, but now looking back, I absolutely, there's no way I would be doing what I'm doing if I hadn't gone through all of those things. And like you say, we retract inside, and I did that for about 10 months of 2010, right up till early December. And I think the other thing is, particularly for men sometimes, is that because we feel we're the breadwinner or we're supposed to be the head of the family, and we add even more labels and pressure to ourselves, which causes us extra stress and anxiety. And I got to a point by December that year that I didn't really have psychologically, I had nowhere else to go. I was going down a path, and it was getting darker and darker. And I talk about this often. I went out for a walk one morning. I'd got up in the morning and I'd said to my wife Christine that I was going out for a walk. I needed some fresh air. I needed to clear my head. In reality, I didn't intend to come home that day. I left and went to the wooded area not far from where we live. I was plotting to end my life that day, that I wasn't going to come home, that they would be better off without me. But what happened that day, people talk about it being a flash of inspiration or something like that. It didn't really happen like that for me. But one thing that did stick with me is that when I've made a final decision that that's what I was going to do, I was sitting in a clearing in the woodlands, and from the point I made the decision, I just felt a real calmness, a real peace that I hadn't experienced before. I didn't feel any of the stress. I didn't feel any of the pressure. And at the time, I wasn't sure why that was. It just led me to give me enough of a breathing space or a bit of clarity to ask some questions. I started to ask myself, okay, so I could have died in a car accident 8-9 months ago, and I didn't. I've gone through virtually 3 years of struggle, both financially and personally, and my family have. There has to be a reason why I'm doing that. There has to be a reason why I'm in this position. And if it was to end now, if that was the reason for doing it, it was to end my life now. Why didn't I die in a car accident 9 months ago? And that was enough for me to be able to take a breath and say, okay, well, there's got to be more to life than this. I need to understand more about me, but also about why I'm here, because I must have another purpose. Otherwise, there would be no point. And that was enough for me to get to go back home. And I now look back at that with more clarity about what happened and why I felt like that than I ever did then, because of the journey that I've been on.
I hear that willingness to end it all gave you clarity to say, okay, well, if I'm going to end it all, let's make sure I'm going out with like the best perspective. Almost, it's like I'm willing to let go of trying to make everything work. So like, if I like really go for this, and you step up to that edge, to that precipice, you see your life flash before your eyes, you see what's important flash before your eyes, and you're like, wait a second, if it's important for me to, live and keep moving forward through these tragedies, through these, car accidents and things like that. Like, why didn't I die then? Because there's a reason why I survived. There's a reason why I kept moving forward through that. And so it's like you got that perspective, and that brought you back, man. That's huge.
Yeah, and I'd like to say, that I kind of went back and everything, my whole life changed from there on in, but it doesn't really work like that. But the next real big kind of light bulb moment for me was that same day. I'd gone home, and I was kind of looking for a bit of inspiration. I think looking for something to hang on to, a bit of hope. And I went into the office. We had a home office where we'd work from, and I went to the bookshelf. I was just looking for something to read, I think. And I took a book from the shelf that I'd read several times before, as I said. But the copy I took off was one that my son bought me at our last kind of family holiday before the financial crisis. He bought me it at the airport, and it was a book called Think and Grow Rich.
Yes. And
I read it, but I say now that I saw things in the book that I'd never seen before. And that day, I read it all night. I never slept. I just kept rereading the book. And there was so many things in there that just kept coming back to, well, there's a reason for everything, and you are here, so you need to find out what the reason is, and you need to understand it's down to you to do something about this. But I also kept having these feelings of that everything had happened perhaps because I didn't feel like I was good enough. You talked about worthiness, and that's something that I started to try and understand.
Yeah.
And I think my next big, huge breakthrough was understanding, what my limiting beliefs were about who I was, who I thought I was, and being able to break them was the next step in releasing that handbrake even further and being able to say, okay, now I can go and do this. And that led me to setting up a consultancy firm. I did some consultancy business for 3 or 4 years, which was successful. But my next big jump in terms of understanding my purpose, if you like, was that all the stuff I was learning from personal development, I become a bit of a personal development junkie at that time. I was at every event, I was reading every book, I was listening to every audio I could, watching YouTube videos here, there, and everywhere. But what I realized was that wherever I was, even though I was consulting from not from a personal development or a coaching point of view, from a business point of view, the things I was sharing and the things I enjoyed sharing most were all the stuff I was learning from personal development. And I'd started sharing them also with my family and some, people who were close to me. And I started slowly but surely to see impacts in their lives, changes that they weren't making, and what I talk about being this ripple effect around that. And then I had a few people who approached me and said, we've seen where you were and what you've gone through. Would you come and share your story with a few people who we think might benefit? And I said, yeah, sure. If I can help someone, I will. I did that. And then that snowballed, and I had more people asking. And then I had some people saying, do you think you could share some of the things that you went through with me personally? And then I did, and I had them come back and say, oh, that was fantastic. I've really benefited from that. And suddenly I just almost came through me that was like, well, you should be doing this all the time. This is why you went through all 5, was to be able to share that message with people who are potentially still in that place, or get to go through it, so they don't have to feel like they do or you did when you were going through it.
Yeah, I love hearing the way your coaching business came together, because you had success in real estate, you were doing consulting, and then I think a lot of people, in my opinion, even myself, we want to invent a vehicle that goes and serves people and helps them and changes the world. Like even coaching for me, it's always felt like, yes, I love coaching, I love serving people. And the ability for people to come to you, to gravitate to you naturally, and you're just like solving problems for them. You're being there for them. You're alleviating pain. It's just happening, and especially before even the money is exchanged, so to speak. You're just doing it because you have value to add. You love to solve the problem. People are naturally hungry for the solution. I think that's like the best way for a business to be created. It's not always that natural. It's not always that easy, but like when it does happen like that, I think it's so special, man. And just your own journey and how you've gone through it. Like I can really hear the alignment of you living your purpose, and like people being hungry for this wisdom, being hungry to release the mental handbrake, being hungry for this transformation, man. Like people are hungry for it.
Yeah, and I agree entirely, and I don't decry anyone who's gone and got an education in coaching or gone through some form of certification or anything like that. I haven't. I've studied with lots of mentors up and down all over the world, essentially, since I started in personal development. But I've got no formal certification. I don't have a degree in anything other than engineering. But I coach from the perspective of, this is not something I read in a book. It may have been something I read in a book, but I know how to apply it because I've been doing it for the last 10 years, just in my own life and in my family's life. And since then, it's evolved into helping other people. And that for me is where my value is, I think, in terms of not just being able to help people, but to empathize and say, yeah, I know where you're coming from, because that's exactly what I went through. I know exactly how that happens. I know what created it. I know I was coaching a client recently, and we were talking about a particular belief, and it was good if you like to be able to sit there and say, yeah, okay, so I can tell you not the exact incident that occurred in your life that brought it to you, but I can tell you where it occurred for me. I can, because that's a belief that I held,
Right.
and to have them be able to say, right, okay, so how did you deal with that?
Yep.
And how can that translate into my life and business? It adds real strength to what I'm doing and weight to what I'm doing. And I'm hugely passionate about being able to share that with people. I really want people to understand that who they think they are is not who they are. We all lots of people come to me with this idea that maybe I'm not quite good enough, or maybe I'm not worthy, and that's not true. And the more people I impact believe that that's not possible is serves my purpose.
Yep. And these beliefs of unworthiness, you could call it limiting beliefs, things that people are carrying. Like, what do you think our audience needs to know about these beliefs that are currently living in their head and programming that they've picked up over the years? What do you want them to know, Dean?
I think the biggest things for me is I have a very clear, logical 4 or 5 step process that I use when I'm working with someone. But the basics are that all of those beliefs that we have are generated usually between the ages of 0, so birth, and about age 5, 6, or 7, depending on the science that you read. But in our formative years,
Yep.
and they come from essentially innocuous situations. They don't have to be traumatic experiences to develop specific beliefs, but they happen because in our childhood things happen repetitively, hundreds of times a day, without conscious decision. Then it's fairly easy to form a belief. And I give examples. I coached somebody recently. One of the beliefs they had was that people aren't interested in what I have to say, and it's a belief I come across often in a sales environment. Now, when you were 5, 6, or 7 years old, having a belief that people aren't that interested in what you have to say, it doesn't really affect you.
Right.
But when you're 30 years old, or 40 years old, or 50 years old, and you're the CEO, or you're an entrepreneur, or you're the head of the sales team, or you're a salesperson, that's huge ramifications.
Yep.
And you think back to looking at it logically. If you're a young child at 3, 4, or 5 years old, and you experience something, whether that's something new to you, whether it's something you did, you've drawn a picture, whatever it is, it's the most amazing thing for you as a 3 or a 4-year-old child that you've ever done. If you take that to an adult, your parents or grandparents, or someone you feel is what I would call a caretaker position, someone responsible, if you take it to them and show them it, and usually they take it with huge enthusiasm, look at what I've just done, dad, look at this.
Yep.
The instant reaction usually for adults is, yeah, not now. I'm busy doing something, so I'm preparing the tea or the dinner, or I'm on the phone if you're working from home. Now, children immediately, that's not, you don't immediately form a belief then. But how many times does a child ask for your attention during, let's say, a day? Hundreds of times. And so over a few of those times where you are told, not now or later, or dad's on the phone, or whatever it is, it's not inconceivable for the child to think, well, you know what, he's not really interested in what I've got to say. And so understanding where they come from was one of my biggest breakthroughs. This idea that I was looking, when I first got into this, I was starting to look for huge traumatic events that may have caused me to believe things.
Yep.
It doesn't work like that.
Nope.
And so understanding that is the first thing. The second thing is looking for comparable experiences. So that's a good example. I was working with a client recently who had that belief, and we said, okay, can you imagine, even if you can't remember a specific time, can you imagine times when you may have done that? You've asked for someone's attention and not got it. Yeah, I could remember hundreds of times. Okay. And then we look at, right, okay, so think about that particular belief and those particular events. Is that particular belief that you developed at that time, is that the only truth, or is that just one interpretation of those events? What other reason could your father or mother have had for not wanting to listen to you at that time, as an example? And they will come up themselves with 6 or 7 different interpretations. Well, my father was busy, he was at work. Okay. What else? Maybe he wasn't interested in that particular point in time. But that doesn't mean he'll never be interested. And you look at, we look at those different perspectives. And then once people understand there's a different perspective than the one they chose, and we break the emotional connection with the previous one they had, then the belief no longer exists. Because it only ever existed in their mind anyway. It was never the truth. It was never really there. You can't see it in those events. And when people understand that those events don't really have an inherent meaning unless we give them one,
right,
then the whole world changes. Because then you can start to pick those apart. And it's, I describe it a little bit like, well, two ways: either peeling the layers of an onion, so we peel them back and we expose the real self, or we're releasing the handbrake. We take it down a notch at a time until it's flat to the floor. Because the other thing is that I really discovered was that, I attended lots of events from a personal development perspective. I read lots of books. I watched loads of motivation videos and talks. And I was hugely empowered and inspired for several weeks. And then I would go back to the way that I operated before. And I could never stand why it didn't last for longer than that.
Yep.
And the truth is, it's because if we don't, it doesn't matter how big the engine is we put in the car. If we keep the handbrake on, it's never going to go as fast as it should be able to.
Nope.
And that was what was happening. I was being hugely empowered and inspired. I was putting a bigger engine in the car. I was getting more and more motivated, more fired up. But I never got rid of the handbrake.
Wow.
And so the people that I work with, that's what I want them to do. Yes, great. Do all of those things. Meditate, visualization. All of those things are hugely important. They all work. But if you don't release the handbrake in the first place, you're never going to run at 100% capacity. You're only ever doing to do 40 or 50 or 60% maximum.
Wow. And Dean, I want to ask, because I think even our audience, a lot of people have done, let's say, limiting belief works and they like take an inventory, they scratch it out and put the affirmation next to it, things like that. Like there's a lot of different techniques that are going around. What would you say it is that makes the process that you take your clients through different, and like why does it work where it gets to that core, the deepest root, so we don't have to keep trying to uproot the same thing for the next couple decades?
Yeah, and it's a great question, because that's exactly what I'd done before. I always felt that whatever process I tried, whatever technique I tried, it felt like a coping strategy or a way to overwrite something, or put it in a box out the way, and we'll start believing this. And I don't ever decry that those things don't work,
right?
Because they do. I said I was delivering some coaching for a sales organization a while back, and one of the things we talked about was that if you bring in a group of salespeople and you ask them to make 100 to 150 cold calls a day in your environment, you'll have a group of people who you bring in who've never done it before, who will massively struggle to do that. And you would probably be able to get them to do it. You would break their fear of rejection and their fear of failure if they were able to do 100 to 150 calls a day for, say, 6 months, because eventually it wouldn't make any difference. The problem is most people can't go that long. They'll not be able to keep it up, and that's the same for me with affirmation. Is that most people give up. They're not equipped to be able to do it for long enough. And so the difference is from the process that I use is that I just want them to see for themselves in a real logical way that they chose that belief. And they could have chosen any other interpretation at that particular time. And if they did, and we get them to experience it, if you choose another belief at that time in the same event, when you were 5 years old or however old you were, how do you feel emotionally now? And they will tell you, I don't feel it's the same way. Okay, so the only reason that you have this limiting belief and this emotional connection to it is because you chose it at that particular point in time. And had you chosen another one, you wouldn't feel the same. You would believe something entirely different. And I think the other thing is, I worked with a client recently, and one of the things they said was, we went through the process, and it takes a bit of time. I have a 90-minute breakthrough call that I work with people, and I guarantee that in that 90 minutes, we'll find the number one limiting belief they have, and we'll eliminate it permanently forever.
Damn.
That's my guarantee.
Damn.
And in that 90 minutes, we might spend 45 or 50 or 60 minutes even trying to find out exactly what the belief is, because there's a nuance for lots of people. It's finding exactly what it is for them. We might take an hour to do that. We might only need 15, 20 minutes to actually eliminate the belief.
Right.
Because the process is really quick and simple. And I had a client I worked with, and when we finished, he was blown away. But his response was, "I'm just not sure. I've tried other things, and I've never come across something that works as quick as this. So I feel amazing, but I'm just not sure that it can work as fast as that." And I said, "Okay, so what you're experiencing is that this idea that you've tried it before, and change it should be difficult and should take a long time." And he was like, "Well, yeah." And I said, "But that's just a belief itself. We need to break that one."
Yep.
Because it can change like that.
Yeah.
And once people experience it, and they get that emotional disassociation and that empowerment, then they can go on and do whatever it is they want. That's when we get real. I talk about, people talk about transformations. I talk about quantum leaps. I want people to not just go, step changes. I want people to go from here to there.
Yeah.
In the shortest possible time. And I think that's the other thing, is that one of the things about the way I like to coach is that, yes, I've got some clients I've worked with for a number of years. But that's not because the process takes years. It's because they want continuous support around as they grow and develop. They want something else. I don't ever really want to be working with a client for 12 months or 24 months or longer. I want clients to come to me. If every client I came to did my 90-minute breakthrough call and said, "That's it, I don't need any more than just that number one belief, I'm gone and I'd be like the happiest man in the world. It'd be amazing."
I love it. It's really prioritizing the results that you get clients, right? Like I think there's businesses out there that's like, well, I want to, and it's good to want to build a relationship for life. And I think when you really prioritize what is the absolute most I can give, I can provide with my service, with me being present in this life, with my gifts, with the knowledge and the wisdom that I've experienced, it's to create a massive transformation, a quantum leap, a breakthrough to where this person doesn't even recognize themselves anymore after, just one session or working together. And it's like, to be able to create that level of transformation, we could do it in a year. We could do it in 2 years, 5 years, and say, let's do it for 5 years. Why not? But if we can do it in one session, like, why not? Why would we not do that and create that level of deep transformation, man? It's genius, Dean. I love it.
Yeah, and that's for me. That's what coaching is about. That's what I'm passionate about. I want people to, I message my clients after sessions. I did one the other day, and I messaged just to say, how's things gone in the last 48 hours? To get messages back when people say, I feel completely different. This is awesome. Yeah. That's like that. That's worth everything.
It's awesome. It's transforming people's lives, man. I think it's one of the most fulfilling things that we can do as coaches, as service providers, is like really be there and give them a new reality to step into, man. So I think this is great. If people are procrastinating, is that the same thing as a mental handbrake?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, the other thing that I've learned really is that there are kind of so people talk about limiting beliefs, but in general, most people, if they were coming to you, would not necessarily be able to come and say, "I have this limiting belief and it's this."
Right.
Most people come with a behavior pattern. So they come and say, what I've found is I'm really struggling with public speaking, with being up on stage in front of people. So they talk about patterns of behavior. So procrastination is just a pattern of behavior. And for every pattern of behavior, there are a number of limiting beliefs that support that pattern of behavior. So I often describe it as, I did a short video the other day with, I don't know what it's called in the States, but in the UK there's a wooden block game called Jenga. It's kind of like a wooden tower, and you have to push the blocks out. So basically, I did an example of it the other day, because a behavior pattern's like that, like the tower. And every limiting belief is one of the blocks that supports it. And people, and this is where I say that people go to events or they read books, or they've gone through previous examples of, trying to break a limiting belief before, or developed a coping strategy. And so in that game, you can push some of the blocks out and the tower doesn't fall down. It still stays standing. And that's the same as the behavior pattern. So if you've got a behavior pattern of procrastination, and you do some work around it, you might be able to push some of the blocks out, but the pattern won't fall down.
Wow.
It still stands. And until you find what the core beliefs are, there's maybe in that Jenga tower, there might be 6 or 7 blocks that if you push them, it all collapses. And that's what we're looking to do. So when someone came with procrastination, we'd be looking at, okay, in that pattern of behavior, what beliefs, there might be 17 or 18 limiting beliefs that support that pattern.
Right.
You might not have them all. You might only have 5 or 6 of them, but which 5 or 6 are they? And we work through and identify which are the ones and what's the nuance of the belief that affects you. Then when we push those blocks out, that pattern of behavior just collapses. And that gives people the freedom to go and take the action that they want when we collapse the pattern. So things like procrastination, lack of confidence, fear of public speaking, those types of things are just patterns of behavior.
Yeah.
What we need to do is address the underlying belief system that supports it. And once we can do that, then the pattern's irrelevant. It doesn't make any difference anymore. And it no longer affects them.
Yeah. I hear that there's there can be just a core set as far as limiting beliefs go. There's like a core set, like 6, 7, maybe even a total number of like 15 to 20. It sounded like that. It's just, you might have a different flavor. You might have a different way of wording it. Each person has a different way of interpreting that. But would you say that you've kind of cataloged, well, these at some level, it's this around these beliefs. It's like some version of this. Is it pretty standard at this point? Have you kind of seen all the different limiting beliefs that can be there?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, if somebody came to me and said, like for example, I really want to significantly improve my confidence. I'm really low on confidence, and I really need to have this high performing confidence. There are. I could probably tell you the top 20 beliefs that sit and support that behavior pattern. And there'll be some core ones which are the same for almost everybody. But then you've got to find the ones that are slightly different. There's a nuance around what it is. And they can be, the other thing is that what happens is we may take away a particular belief. So we may eliminate a belief. And what that does is a bit like peeling the onion, if you like. It peels away something that exposes something else.
Yeah.
What happens then is somebody says, okay, so for example, I'm not good enough is probably the number one limiting belief that, most people come. When they come, that sits in probably 6 or 7 of the major behavior patterns.
Yeah.
And eliminating that can have all sorts of impacts on people. But often what happens is you eliminate a key one like that, and what happens is there's an underlying belief. There's something else, which isn't the fact that you're not good, don't believe you're good enough. It's just, there's a nuance to it. For example, I'm trying to think of one that we did recently that was a little bit kind of different, a little bit off topic. It was one of my clients, when we peeled back some of the layers, he realized that there was a belief that existed that he needed some validation, he needed some approval. And we started to put a form of words together about what that belief meant to him. And once we discovered the form of words, and it's really easy because you can visually see people change. When you get the form of words right for the belief, you'll see them tense up. They can feel,
wow,
this, that resonates with me. That's definitely what it is. And then we can say, okay, now let's address that then. But the time we take normally is around identifying the process for eliminating them. It's minutes.
That's so powerful, and it's interesting that I feel the correlation. People want to know who they are, right? Who am I? What's my purpose? What am I here to do? And I think that is the thing that like takes people the longest to remember that, to get back in touch with that. But then once they are, then it's about consciously, choosing it. But it's simple to say, no, I already found my purpose. My purpose is to be me. My purpose is to, be the best version of me that I can be, to show up and do the most that I can today. And it's like a simple choice. So I love the correlation between the identifying the limiting belief can take like the most time typically is to find the nuances, the patterns, how it shows up, and start to build around it. But then changing that belief, it's just a simple decision. It's a choice, to make that mean something else.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the what I've found over the times that I've coached people, and I've been coached when I was looking to develop myself,
Mhm.
was that the number of times that I'd experienced something and thought, okay, but surely it can't be this complicated. I've read some processes and systems, or I've experienced them, and it's like you need to be a psychologist with 4 or 5 degrees and 10 years worth of studying to understand some of the information. It's like it cannot be that complicated.
No.
I think it comes from my engineering background, but I prefer things to be really simple and logical, and
Yes.
I need to be able to see the beginning and the end, and I say, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
And if it makes sense, a change happens really quickly.
Mhm.
It's something else. I think the biggest additional light bulb moment I had was probably about just over 2 years ago.
Mhm.
And I started to, having worked in the field of limiting beliefs, particularly, and helping people eliminate that. After the process, usually the first or second time we've done this with a client, I'll take them through another short process, which helps them just to see themselves and their lives from a different perspective. So we talk about what I want. The essence of the experience is to be able for them to be able to say or understand and know that actually, in order for there to be a belief, there needed to be someone to create the belief,
Mm. Mm.
and get them to experience this idea that it was them that created it. And if they created it, they're effectively, because if their beliefs and they agree with it, their beliefs create their life
Yeah.
because they've experienced it. Well, if their beliefs create their life and they create their beliefs, then that makes them the creator of their life.
Yes.
And I want them to really experience that in a little bit of a different way than they've ever experienced it before. And that's why we do it after eliminating belief, because they've been in that position. And what that did for me was about 2 years ago, I started to really explore that bit, this idea of, okay, so if I'm creating my beliefs and I'm aware of the things that are happening to me, who is it that is aware of these things?
Mm.
Who is it that's the creator of these things? And that took me down a path. Most people would, and I probably wouldn't have used these words a while ago, it would have put me off because it has specific connotations for certain people.
Yeah.
But it took me on a more spiritual path,
Yes.
for want of a better phrase, but not from a religious perspective, more a question of who am I?
Yep.
And over the last 2 years, I spent a fair bit of time investigating some of those aspects.
Yeah.
And again, I think, it's different people resonate with different people, but I spent a lot of time not just kind of learning and researching, but more, I think, trying to find someone who really resonated with me, someone who understood it, but also spoke in a way that I did in terms of just a logical process, the simplest, quickest, effective way to do this, which is what I tried to do with the belief elimination process I developed. And that's exactly the same. So I now have a much deeper understanding of that, but on a much more clear level and a simple basis than I ever did. And one of the mentors that I found, who I do a lot of studying with around that subject, a guy called Rupert Spira, has a very, very simple and direct approach to those aspects around who you are and this idea that you are not your thoughts. And in the same way, it really resonated with me because I'd spent a number of years already telling people they are not their beliefs.
Yeah.
And when he started to say, "Well, you are not your thoughts," you are the witness of those thoughts, that really resonated.
Yeah.
And this idea that who I really am and who I'm, my pure awareness, my consciousness, that opened up another door for me in terms of, another level of understanding. And I think that's also something that's significantly benefited me during this particular period of time,
Mm.
when lots of people are feeling anxious or stressed or, um, you know, having a difficult time of it. And this is not that, to sound impressive or glib about anything, but I genuinely don't feel that. I feel extremely calm and peaceful. Not that it doesn't affect me at ever.
Right. Right.
We all have those times when it flares up and you suddenly. But what it does give me is an awareness to be able to recognize it when it happens and say, "Okay, I see what's happening," and having an understanding of it. And that significantly helped me during this period of time because it's given me the ability to, as we said earlier, kind of extract myself, stand back from that, witness what's going on, and say, "Okay, I'm not going to be a part of that. I'm going to look at how I can have an impact for myself and also in the world in terms of what I want to deliver, and how can I best do that during this period of time.
And I hear the baseline of who you are being is more sturdy, right? Like the empowered, the peaceful, the resourceful, knowing that every situation, every circumstance, like when other people are in it and it is them, they are truly in that situation and circumstance. They are the anxiety, they are the fear, they are the overwhelm, because those are the thoughts, those are the beliefs that they are interpreting as who they are. You have this baseline where you're able to just keep pulling back to the witness, to the consciousness that is not, we are not this body, we are not our identity, we are not our thoughts or beliefs, but we are that witnessing presence. So to be able to zoom back to that is so much more resourceful. And then you get to choose, hey, with all the situation and circumstances, who do I want to be? Who do I choose to be? Do I choose to be anxious and overwhelmed, or do I choose to be peace and resourceful and the calm in the eye of the storm?
Yeah, for sure, and that really helps significantly. And I think the other thing that's been able to do is, I have a saying when I'm coaching people often, is that the reason, because often people will go through a process and then say, well, why didn't I see that? Why didn't I see that? That was so obvious. And I have a saying I say to them often, that when you're in the picture, you can't see the frame.
Yep.
You've got to step outside to be able to see it. And that's the same, not just for other people when you're coaching, but also for me. In an environment like this, the ability to be able to step out of the picture and just see the bigger frame, that's what gives you the perspective to say, okay, how do I want to respond to what's happening, rather than reacting in the instant. Take a step back, and how do I respond to what's going on, and how can I best serve both myself and everybody else.
Dean, this is gold, man. I want to drive it home with the final takeaways from this interview, and then we're going to share with our audience how they can transform some limiting beliefs. Because, dude, I'm just like so amped on this session that you're giving to people when people work with you. So let's drive it home, man. What do you want people to really get from this interview, Dean?
I think the keys for me, probably three things. One is they are not who they think they are. If they had one glimpse of who they really were and what their potential was, man, they would just, it would literally blow their mind. So if we could get people to experience that, that's amazing. That's the first thing. The second thing is that people often are concerned about this idea that the behavior patterns and the limiting beliefs are going to take a long time to break, and it's really difficult and hard. If they took away from this interview that change is not difficult and it does not take a long time, it can be done, and it can be done quickly if that's the decision that you make and that's the belief that you have. And I often use a quick description to say that, and hopefully there's no children watching this evening on Facebook. But at some point in our lives, we believed that Santa Claus was real.
Yeah.
We didn't need to go through hundreds of hours of therapy to change that belief. It went like that. But that's just the same as everything else we believe.
So true.
Yeah. So it doesn't need to take a long time. It can be really simple. And the third and final thing is that whatever's going on is just a situation. Every situation is either an obstacle or an opportunity, and the person who decides that is you. And you can change that at any given point in time. You can make a decision to say, I see this as an opportunity. Where will it come from? People often say, I'll believe it when I see it. And I often tell people that, well, if you don't believe it, you'll never see it.
Yep.
You've got to start the other way around. Yep. So you've got to believe there's some opportunities in order to be able to see some out there. Yeah. And if people got those three things, I would be blown away. That would be amazing.
Yes, I love it. We got it, Dean. We got all those. And I know that there's people who are resonating with this. They want to transform their limiting beliefs, step into who they really are, man. How can they stay connected with you? What can they do next with you, man?
Okay, so I'm on all the traditional social media channels. You can get me at Dean Fox Coaching on both Facebook and Instagram. You can get me directly at my website, deanafox.com. And for everybody who's out there listening and thinking, okay, this sounds useful, and I'd like to find out a little bit more, they can go to my website. But also on there, I have an online program which I've spent a while developing, which has got 5 steps in it. And one of those steps is about resilience, the development of total resilience. And it's massively valuable at this particular point in time with everything that's going on. But that module is available for free, so people can get that and download that So it's an ebook and some coaching module, coaching videos. That's available directly from our website, so they can get that, or they can reach out to me on any of the social channels, and I'd be more than happy to have a conversation with anybody.
You're an extraordinary human being, Dean, and the world really needs you right now and all these gifts that you're bringing. And I know that this is just the beginning of the impact that you're creating in the world. So dude, just keep showing up, keep getting this voice, this message that you have out to the world, reminding people that, especially going through difficult times, like you've been through before and you bounce back from, you were at rock bottom, man, and you've come back so strong with such a more enlightened, empowered perspective. People need it right now. People are hungry for it. So just keep showing up, man. I'm super grateful to get this message out to my audience and everyone who's tuning in. Go to deanafox.com. That's DEANAFOX.com, and go check out Dean's stuff. Schedule a session with him. Go get that first module or the module of the course. And Dean, thank you so much, man.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks very much, Chris. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. We'll see you soon, okay?
Okay, take care.